Hello, my friends. It's been a crazy couple of days. Actually, I forgot my computer because I was at another studio yesterday. So I've written a bunch of the questions from today on a whiteboard like a crazy person. What's up? How's everybody doing? Oh, I want to apologize to all the people that have been asking about Twitch. I keep saying I'm going to go on Twitch and comp a vocal for you guys just so you can see what the hell it is that I do anyway. And things have just gotten crazy busy and I haven't done it. But I plan on doing it real soon. I'm going to go on there and comp a vocal and y'all can just watch me edit things. But everything has been really crazy. All right, I'm going to bring Jon on. We'll just get right to it. What's up?
Hello.
Oh, man. Things have all of a sudden gotten really intensely busy this week, which is good news, I guess. But
yeah,
man. And I left my computer I left my computer at home, but I brought it to another studio yesterday at my session. So instead of writing all the notes down, I wrote it on my whiteboard and chicken scratch. Or chicken scrawl or whatever it's called. So anyway, it's going to be a little chaotic today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Kind of similar this weekend. I mean, even just today, got a bunch of things coming in, which is exciting. Trying to start the year off strong. So pumped to mix. I got a new clipper plugin I fucking love. So I'm excited to use a new clipper. That's what I'm probably most excited about right now.
Yeah, you were telling me about that.
We were talking about it at dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the clipper plugin? What are you liking about it? And
I don't want to vouch for it yet. Maybe we check in 3 weeks to know if it's really landed. It's only been on one mix so far. So I'm excited to jump off this and mix another song with it.
I don't think you talking about it necessarily is vouching for it. I mean, this is the process too. This is like you find something new. Somebody said something good about it. You tried, as I recall, you talked about it. You're like, I tried it a couple of different settings and it wasn't better to me, or it wasn't as good as the T-Rex one, or it was different in a way you didn't like, but then you tried it on some other things and maybe it was a bit better. Maybe it's worked.
I wound up having, it's the Boz digital clipper, big clipper it's called. And I didn't necessarily understand the routing of it. It's pretty complicated with the buttons. They're not really labeled very clearly. You have to hover over them to see what each of the thing is. So I wound up looking for a preset that was a hard clip preset and then working my way back, understanding how they were routing within the plugin for the hard clipper. And then backing it off to make it more of a subtle version of what that was. I can imagine the hard clipper, actually, that preset that's built into it, being super cool for some drums and some automation things, or maybe a whole section is getting a little bit more clippy and then turning up the input. And it's just, it's not as intuitive as the T-Rex. The T-Rex is basically 3 knobs: an input, an output, ceiling, and a slope. This has a limiter built in, and I wanted to turn the limiter off. It took me a minute to learn how to turn the limiter off. I could hear the limiter. I didn't want it to be limiting. I just wanted a clipper. So I think it was just more of a learning curve. And where I landed sounded more exciting and more dynamic than the T-Rex on a level matched AB.
Again, for this particular mix.
For this particular mix, exactly. And, I'm going to now try it on everything moving forward. That's what I tend to do. I overuse something and see if it sticks, but it's a bit more of what I would want out of a limiter, which is more dynamics. If anybody's followed Live with Matt Rad, I think everyone knows that I like dynamics, but I also like competitive loudness and density to a mix. So I'm always trying to find that happy medium and that balance. And this seems to give me more of that. There's an attack and release control. For example, there's a frequency spectrum. So maybe I don't want to clip below 100 hertz or above 5K. Or maybe I only want to clip and give that feeling of clipping. Maybe you're touching a percussion bus or group or something, and you want to have that clipper only on the mid-range. You can actually use this for that. So I think it's just a little bit more in-depth, and for a geek like me, not necessarily a set it and forget it type person, I'm interested to see where I go with it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I've been working on like 4 or 5 things at once, all of which I'm either mixing or essentially mixing, even if I end up co-mixing with somebody. So I'm getting into clipping and leveling and loudness, and it is crazy how different the application of clippers are based on the song. There's definitely there's a couple of songs I was doing where the same artist, the same production, same producer before it came to me. And one of the songs worked really well with, I did like a drum bus and a music bus and a vocals bus, and little bits of clipping on all of them individually was the best thing to add up the right way to get loudness and get excitement. And then the other one, I tried the same thing, and it was like everything sounds squished and wrong. And so I just put it. I didn't use any buses except for the mix bus, and then I smashed the mix bus, and it worked perfectly. And just like every song is different, every set of samples is different, it's a different key, and the 808s are slightly different. Like you never, there's no one size fits all for any of this stuff.
Yeah, it might work on the lower octave, and then that setting doesn't work for the high octave, or maybe the high octave jump sounds gnarly because of the setting for the low. Like it could be dope, but it also could be not. This disclaimer, just because I'm saying I'm going to use this plugin on everything for a minute, it's just because I'm a scientist and I want to fuck around with it and learn it in and out. It might not be right for the 808. It might not be right for every record. It might not be good for hip hop. It might be great for pop. It might be great for hip hop and not great for pop. Maybe it's the sickest thing ever for a jazz record because a jazz record wants some sort of clipping because we've never heard a jazz record like that. Who the hell knows? But it's definitely worth trying out. And I tend to not want to do this on this podcast where we just talk about tools and tricks and how to use them. But at the same time, that's what I get geeky on, especially early in the year. We were talking about this at dinner the other night. I tend to spend the early part of the year kind of developing what's going to be like. I have a little bit of a mix bus shift and new plugins or new settings on the plugins. And I'm going to just kind of let that be for the rest of the year, probably. I'm not going to think too much about it. I might think about it on the first few mixes of the year, getting excited about a new tool and really understanding it. But then that's probably going to just live on it for the rest of the year. And then I'll assess again. And kind of our last week's conversation about mastering and me not caring what the mastering engineer does, if it's improving it or whatever. It's the same thing I was telling you about. Like I'll check in with Dale at the end of the year and I'll say, hey, do you notice something different? What are you doing less of or more of this year than you did last year? And to have that relationship with a mastering engineer, is really helpful to me because it's kind of a test of what I did last year. So I'm doing that now. I had that conversation with Dale already, and I think my change was for the better. So hopefully next year will be the same thing. And there's subtle changes. These aren't dramatic things. So anyway.
Well, I like what you said too, and people should understand what it means when you say I'm now going to use it on everything. It doesn't actually mean it's not going to work on everything. You're going to try it on everything because when you get a new tool, and this is the thing we've talked about in the past, if you get a new, when I get an analog keyboard, there are times when I've gotten a new one, or I get a new synth plugin or something, I should be trying to use it on everything all the time because that's how you get to the depths of it and that's how you get to the end of it. And then at some point you scale back and go, okay, this is what it's useful for. So you will probably try this clipper limiter on everything and just see what it works well for. And certainly you're not going to be using it on everything. Oh, there's an outside chance that happens, but it seems unlikely. Like it seems unlikely that you'll. Well, it seems unlikely that you'll keep it on every single thing, but you'll definitely be at least trying it on everything. And maybe it'll work great for everything, but that's the idea, is that when you get something that has a lot of parameters, it behooves you as a creative person to try to see all the limits of what it can provide, what it can do as a tool for you, and then decide where it fits.
I'm thinking about a lot of exactly. I'm thinking about a few mixes that I worked on last year with the T-Rex one, and I kept having to back off the slope so I wouldn't be hearing the clipping on kick if the kick was loud, if it was a kick loud mix or a bass heavy mix, and you would hear little crunchy things. I don't want those things, but they'll be happening once in a while, and you have to like go in and automate a kick where it's hitting on a low end, dense downbeat where there's an impact, there's a bass down an octave, there's a synth that has a bit much low end, and like that's where these clipper things are not really flexible because like on that downbeat now it's clipping and you got to figure out where it's coming from, and it's not cool. Like we don't want that. That's not the clipping that we're looking for necessarily. If it's more of the vibe where the whole thing is clippy and that's the sound, then that's different than like it's a ballad and all of a sudden on the downbeat you have like distortion. It makes zero sense to have that. And that just happened to me on a song. I had to keep backing the slope down. And now this is later in the mix. We've already made all these decisions with that T-Rex clipper, and the slope changes the feel and the release of the clipping. So the slower it gets, the mix starts changing. And I'm like, I don't like this anymore. Where's this clipping coming from? With this clipper, I can now change the frequency of where it begins clipping. And so I think that's why I'm probably going to love this, because then if that's happening, I don't want to sacrifice my loudness that I just spent the entire mix process dialing in. I can just keep moving that frequency up until I release from that sound. And I think that's what's most exciting for me on with this tool, which is why I think it'll probably work more on more things.
And a bunch of people are asking in the chat about clippers and about clipping. We did a whole hour on harmonics and saturation, which it sounds like some of the people asking questions in the chat there could benefit from watching. So we did a whole hour. Somebody maybe in the chat can tell them which episode it was. Obviously, YouTube, it's on my IGTV, but we did a whole hour on harmonics. Also, can people say in the chat, your audio is totally clear, but you're jittering every couple of seconds. I don't know if that's your reception, my reception. Are people seeing things and hearing things okay? Just let us know in the chat.
You look clean to me, and I'm clean here, so I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's just my phone. So I have some of the questions from the week on this crazy ass whiteboard.
Oh, I love that.
Because everybody says clean. Okay, so that's good. It's probably just something with my phone. I don't know. So I wanted to go through a bunch of things. I talked about Twitch. I'm going to do that at some point. It's just things have got really busy, and I apologize. I know I keep talking in DMs people that I'm going to do it, and then I don't end up doing it. But I
should probably do it.
I do want to do it. I have
probably do it. It sounds so exciting watching you edit and compo vocals. So exciting.
Well, what I realize, one of the things that I'm trying not to go too crazy with it, because you and I both have a day job of making records. So all of a sudden, trying to become content creators is not the point of this. But I think it is interesting to me to sometimes go look and see what other people are doing and see what's not there. And I think, to the extent that people like this thing that we're doing, it's a little bit different than a lot of the other producer, mixer, audio content out there. But I haven't actually seen people at a high level actually comp a vocal, because people are asking all these questions. It's like, no, you got to understand, there's nudging and there's key commands, and this is why Pro Tools is great. And yes, you can do that, but really you should be, it's hard to explain without just showing it. So I think, I think some people would like it. At least they've been asking for it, but I don't know. I find it boring as fuck to watch somebody else comp a vocal. So we'll see.
Quickly, just for people that are just tuning in, the clipper I was referring to was comparing the Boz Digital Big Clipper to the T-Rex Clipper by IK Multimedia.
Yeah, and the Boz Clipper is a new thing for you. It has some more parameters. You're learning it. You're starting to try it on lots of things. It's worked at least once. But, as you said, these are new tools that the reason it's worth talking about them at this point. You were hesitant initially to be like, I want to name it, because we're not saying it's the greatest thing ever, but it's a new thing. You're liking it. It's interesting. This is how you evaluate a new tool, is try it on everything and see if you can get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
There were some really good questions that I feel like could open. Oh, somebody asked about your desk. I feel like we've gotten this question a couple times before. Have you said, is your desk a custom built thing that somebody made? Or?
It's from the company Blue Dot.
Okay.
It's a small, it's solid wood. You just want something that's going to be solid and small enough. I could go with 6 inches smaller, but this is how it was, and I like the desk. It comes with a drawer attachment that I feel like would rattle, so I didn't install the drawer attachment on it. So I forgot what the desk is called, but it's from Blue Dot, and I like it a lot. Cool. I think Mike Miller uses the same one in the Atmosphere. Stash desk, exactly.
There you go, Mike Miller chiming in right on cue. A couple people have asked that for I guess they're just curious. So glad we got that. I like this question a lot. And I have a really kind of straightforward answer. I think about this question a lot. Zach asked, tips for making routine when and forgive me if I wrote this down incorrectly, because I was quickly writing. Tips for making routine when creativity is almost always on a whim. I think there is a big misconception about creativity. It is true, especially in the sort of writing and producing aspect, and probably other things as well, other non-music forms, that it is true that a lot of the really big important things happen quickly and unexpectedly. That's why people talk about, I'm channeling something, I don't know what happened, and then I just wrote the song, the lyrics came out. I think oftentimes that is true, that you get these things in bursts, these emotional bursts that you can't really calculate. However, I think it is a big misconception that you're sitting around, inspiration strikes, and then you get to work. The reality is you are most often already working, and then creativity hits you and inspiration strikes. So the big key for, the question is, how do you make a routine when creativity is on a whim? You put yourself in the position where you're already creating, and then when the inspiration strikes, you're already in that mode. You have to put yourself in the position to be ready to go when that stuff goes. And we talk about workflow and things like that a lot. If you're a writer, producer, or if you're a mix engineer, whatever it is, having the shortest distance between I have an idea and now I can create it is really, really important. But even more than that, there's like Stephen King on writing. There's it's talking about other mediums. That book that Stephen King wrote about writing. There's Born Standing Up, which is the Steve Martin book. A lot of the great creative people talk about you have to just go in and be consistent and put yourself in the position and make things. And when you're making things and being consistent, that's when the greatness strikes. It's not you're sitting around and then you have a great idea and then you go over to the piano. It's like you're sitting down playing piano. You have a routine. So yeah, give chance and opportunity. I like that a lot. Like you have to be able to be consistent and putting yourself in the position. I think it's just a misconception that you're just going to sit around and then inspiration is going to strike. War of Art is also good. I like that book a lot. It's sort of like a good, John, shout out on the chat there. War of Art is a nice book because it's one of those things you can read and every chapter is just like, hey, get your shit together and go start making stuff. Like it's basically just that. And it's a great book. I don't know if you have thoughts.
I just think there's so much supporting the fact that a routine, whether it's morning, whatever phase, and there's a great episode of the Huberman Labs podcast that discusses the three phases of the day and when, when to attempt certain things to form better habits, depending on what you're going for. So figure out which phase. You don't have to have a morning routine. Like we talk a lot about that. I have a morning routine, but that's my version of routine. If you are the type of person that wakes up and you're a lyricist and you're waking up from a dream and you feel like you can't write a lyric until you make your espresso or meditate. It's like, if you wake up and you have your notepad or your journal next to your bed, write the lyric before you start your day. Like that could be the start of your routine. So your routine is starting your day by writing, then you're a writer, then that's creativity striking when it's striking most, which is in that morning phase, right? And if that's something you consistently do, that's part of the routine. Like creativity can be part of the routine. Other people need to do tasks that they would not normally do. Once they hit a creative flow, they might forget to do things that are very beneficial for the creativity and the retainment of, things that we're studying, learning, our body, our health, communication with other people, things that we hold in high value, but maybe we'll lose perspective on because we're already in the trenches creatively. So maybe you should consider moving that stuff to the foreground of your day or the beginning of your day. So then later on, you can be more into that, that creative flow state. But that's dependent on everybody. And I encourage people to listen to this episode because there's no wrong or right to where these routines are. And it's just important of doing them consistently around the same time, consistently in those stages. So you could have my morning routine could be your nighttime routine, right? And that doesn't matter. That makes no difference. It's the fact that you're doing them consistently. And any sort of habit building is going to be best for you when you're doing it consistently whenever it is. And I think that's what the takeaway here is for routine is whenever it is, do it about the same time every day for an extended period of time.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I both, with all the humility that is involved with saying this, because there needs to be a lot. I think you and I consider ourselves pretty high performing individuals. And I think that even, at least I'll speak for myself, I think I often, let's see, how do I say this? Like, I often try to oversolve becoming the best creative person. Like I'm trying to be like, what's the optimal solution for the perfect thing? And the reality is like, just get up and start making stuff. Like, I think that's the best advice for most people. And, you and I have been in this for a few decades and, we're working at a pretty high level, however you measure those things in music. And yet I think the thing that works the best for me is just starting the day with making things, starting the day with some output. If I'm like, oh, how do I just go play the piano for a while? Just go write some lyrics. You know, it's funny you said that thing about if you're a lyricist and you're thinking this and thinking this, maybe you should just start the day by writing things. I will do that periodically. If I'm getting more into songwriting mode and I'm doing more, like yesterday, I just went in with an artist and was just working on lyrics and melody. I feel like I'm getting back in that mode. And one of the things I will do is I will start the day before I look at my phone, but before I do anything else, whether it's physically write or type, I'll just write out things in rhyme. And sometimes it's like nonsense, and sometimes it's like just illegible craziness, but just getting your brain in the space of making things, I think will benefit people more than most of the analysis. And the analysis stuff is really important. Are you optimally a morning person or a later in the day person? People's circadian rhythms give them different brain chemicals at different days, and everybody's different. You just got to start making stuff. Just put yourself in the position, and then the creativity I think will show up from there.
Yeah, but it's worth spending some time analyzing, though, because if you think that because your best friend writes their best lyric in the morning and that's the best way to do it, but your brain turns on in the afternoon towards this, right? Like we know, schools tend to start way too early for the majority of kids' brains to be turned on. It's like a whole revamp of the education system needs to happen based on time and when our brains are turned on. So if you're not a morning person, maybe that's not the best time for you to write lyrics, but you think it is because you've never heard any otherwise, and most people do this, and that's inspiring.
Well, what I'm saying is we're already overanalyzing. Just start making stuff, and you'll figure out what part of
Of course. Yeah. But if you just start making stuff blindly, and the stuff isn't coming out to your liking because you just hammer at it at maybe the potential wrong time for you, then you're not going to witness the benefits of your your practice.
If you're already making stuff all the time and you're not doing it optimally, totally analysis.
I would say that important. You're correct though, which is just start doing it and building the habit. But if you also build it in the proper time that's best for you, where you function highest, then you're going to get tenfold the output from that. That's a bit more creatively where you want it to be, I would say. So that's why it's worth doing both.
Maybe. Okay, let's see. We talked about this many episodes ago. Somebody pointed out that this is the 80th live, which is a shitload of lives. But somebody asked, have you ever encountered someone who discouraged your intense work ethic, presumably in music? Again, if I transcribed that wrong, I apologize. Yeah, totally. And actually, this is one of the first of the clips that we made that got some traction, at least on Instagram, which was, something along the lines of a career in music is a terrible decision. It's not something you can really will your way into, I don't think. You kind of have to have this obsessive thing, and you have to sacrifice a lot very often to get to the level that a lot of people think they want to be at. And I don't recommend it for everybody. So in some ways, I will not actively discourage people, but people are like, how do I become a producer? How do I become a mixer? And the answer is do it all the time at the expense of all the other things because you're obsessed with it. Like really isn't an answer beyond that. There's all kinds of tips. And yes, you should try this DAW and you could do this and maybe move to this city or maybe focus on this or whatever. And those things are all valuable. And that's kind of what we're here to do. But the idea of people discouraging work ethic, I don't know if it's so much discouraging as people just don't really understand it. I mean, there's a lot of people who just like, why would you spend that much time? It's like watching somebody comp a vocal. The amount of hours I've spent just like nudging little bits of vocals, it's tens of thousands at this point, probably. It's an insane thing to do rather than like live a life and have healthy relationships and, be a healthy person. You're hunched in front of a computer doing this for hours and hours and hours. In and of itself, I don't even really recommend it to people, but I've gotten so much joy out of it and I've been so obsessed with it and I love it so much. And there've been times when, like when I was in my mid-20s and ran out of money and it was like, man, should I really keep doing this? And the answer was like, I'm going to regret it if I don't figure out a way to do this because this is so meaningful to me and so important to me and such a part of my identity or whatever. I don't know that I want to speak of it as like some grand important thing. It's just where I was at and what I had to do and what I decided to do when shit got really difficult. So yeah, I mean, most people won't understand this thing. And that's okay. And most people shouldn't live this life because it's an insane life. Like, it's an insane thing to spend. I was talking to, I think it was maybe Stuart White, who I was hanging out with a couple of weeks ago, a great mix engineer, Beyonce's engineer and mixer. He's amazing. I'm going to have him on here at some point. But just talking about, like, all of us basically took 4, 5, 6 years out of our life to just obsessively do this at the expense of everything else. You're just in the studio all the time.
That's it?
But I mean, just that's a minimum.
Jeez,
like
I know, minimum. Like
at a minimum, and then you start figuring out, okay, what are my routines and what's a healthy thing look like, and how do I have a good diet and all that. But it's like, it's years of your life to do this thing, and I don't recommend it to most people. But if you're already there, then then we can talk about it. But yeah, most people are going to be discouraging of it, as they should be, because it's a sensible thing to say, hey, maybe don't spend 5 years of your life for no money staring at a computer recording music that's not going to go anywhere. Like, we all did that. But we have a need. I don't know.
I want to come at it a little bit differently, because I completely agree with everything you just said. I've never met anybody that's been in my life deeply that has discouraged me from doing what I'm still doing to this day. I think it's been really clear that this is what I was going to do, and there was nobody could tell me otherwise. So therefore, the support was either there or there was just non-communication on it. Right? Nobody
they just
ever
don't
discouraged
understand.
me.
They're like, I guess, sure.
Yeah,
whatever.
let's see let's see what this turns into. But this dude's gonna just keep going. But nobody also said to me, this is actually something I really wanted to talk about, which is, and this is going to be a little bit grim, I would say, but I'm so thankful I didn't grow up with my parents telling me I can be whatever I wanted to be. Because I think the truth is, and you learn later on in life, that you can't be whatever you want to be. And you can't be whatever you want to be at a certain point, right? Like, you're talking about the discouragement, and in your 20s, you would have regret giving up. I think there are people like the American Idol syndrome. There's an actual scientific term for this effect. I forget. Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's like, you think you're just like the best, and you're completely the worst at it. It's like, at 32 years old, can you just become the next Adele when you're tone deaf, right? Like, you get on the show and people are laughing at you because you're just not that good. Or not even that good. You're like so far, but you're psychologically, you think you're actually that good and deserving of this talent. And that's because people told you maybe you can be whatever you want to be. And this psychologically like affected you in some negative way. I think at some point, and again, I'm only doing this to have a devil's advocate position on what you were talking about, is that I think sometimes people should throw in the towel. I think it's too much, and it can affect relationships negatively from people that are actually looking out for what's best for you, that are seeing you slave, and maybe you're 15 years in, and your best case scenario is playing Hollywood nightclubs at 65, playing guitar, and maybe that makes you happy, but does it make everyone around you happy and people that want to support you? Maybe there is a time to recognize that this was too much, and LA is a city, or New York's a city, or or London, that it's so much effort to just stay afloat, that there could be a better way to use your time and energy and relationships around you. So to be open to that criticism, I'm going to just throw out, might be okay. And I know that's not what this podcast is about.
No,
we're supposed to encourage. I don't find the need to.
I don't think we're supposed to encourage. I don't disagree with you. I mean, it's a really rich topic, because look, at some point I was like, I'm trying, it's something that Eric Valentine said early on when I was working under him. I think he was meeting with a band, and I was sitting there because I was his assistant. I think it was Taking Back Sunday, but it could have been somebody else, where he basically said to them, and I've said this phrase many times and quoted him, I'm trying to make the best record ever, every time. Mm-hmm. Like, it's important to have insane delusional goals, as long as you understand that you're very unlikely to hit them. It's like you're going toward perfection. I'm trying to make records that are better than the Beatles, that are all super triple diamond, or I'm trying to make the most interesting esoteric, whatever the goal is, I'm trying to go to the peak of it for this artist or for myself or sonically, knowing that essentially 100% of the time I will not hit that. And that's the counterplay to it that I think a lot of people are missing. So if you're okay not hitting those things, because you don't know where your career is going to lead, you don't know how the world is going to change. I mean, shit, look at the last 2 years. Like, you don't know how things are going to move. But if you like the process of doing it, if you're obsessed with the process and that brings you joy and fulfillment, which is hard. I did not have that perspective until, I don't know, my mid-20s, when I had my first real crisis of like, I have no money, I have no job, like, what do I do? When you go, okay, is this thing important enough to me that if I don't hit these goals that society says of you're going to have these things on the chart or you'll make X money or whatever, is the process of doing this worth it? And that's a really hard conversation for people to have with themselves. And I think a lot of the quote unquote delusional, I'm going to move to LA and be the most famous person in the world, which is a related conversation to this, those people lack that kind of self-analysis. And I think we all do when we're young, because that's how you're like, I have big dreams, I'm going to make crazy things. But that's where it comes down to. Yeah,
I think in your 20s and nearing your 30s, that's still okay. I think that's a healthy mindset to have. But at some point, depending on if you've isolated yourself from a core group that believed in you and maybe didn't, and then like, you know, you're onto your third wife or husband or partner, and there's just been this pushback of why this and all this from people that you trusted at one point. It's just that's what I'm bringing up, that delusional question. It's like, well, am I doing the right thing? Could I be more useful and valuable otherwise? And it could be slightly adjacent. It doesn't have to be like a whole, you don't have to just move to the middle of nowhere or whatever and open up a deli, unless maybe that's what you want to do as well. I think there's like adjacent perspectives. It's like the artist who has too much pride to be a producer, right? Like, and they just keep going on, but they're a fantastic songwriter and producer, but just the artist thing hasn't hit, and you're 40 years old. And it's like, well, maybe it's time to relinquish control not completely, but maybe splitting it, and the opportunity is presenting itself to be a producer or a songwriter for other artists. Like, well, where do you make that call to switch that trajectory from fame to being a little bit in the background, but the people around you are happier and you're now more fulfilled for other reasons that maybe you didn't think were possible, and the fame is less important? And when is there a time to assess these goals? Are you regularly assessing them? Is it every 5 years? Is it every 10 years? Is it every year? Like, how close are you to it? And how far are you from it? And
well, that's tough too, because I mean, you're talking about a small percentage of people. I think the larger percentage of people are, I'm trying to make music, but I have a day job and maybe a family, and I'm, you know, getting to that place where like, I'm not becoming a huge record producer or mixer yet, but I love doing this. And, you know, what is the trade-off? Do you at some point go, well, I can't spend 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in the studio and like have a normal relationship and have kids and support my family? And what do I do? And, you know, who's encouraging me, who's discouraging me? Those are really tough things. And, you know, truthfully, like, I'm 38 and I don't have kids and I'm single and I want to do that at some point. But I also recognize that a big part of me being able to do the things that I've done in the last decade are because I don't have any dependents. I don't have other people that rely on me. You know, I was fortunate enough that like in my late 20s, I had my first couple of hits and all of a sudden I have enough money. So now I can really pursue it the way I want. And that was, you know, 8-ish years ago. And, you know, what does that next phase of my life look like? I don't know. Somebody asked me, I do want to have kids. I do want to have a family. And now I feel ready for it. But 38 that's a long time to push back life for most people to like start that process. And fortunately, it's in whatever capacity you want to analyze it. It's worked for me, but I don't like I said, I don't recommend it. You have to sacrifice a lot to get to this place. And there's certainly people that have families and do it younger and all that. So I'm not by any means the norm, but it's tough. I mean, it's the only everybody I know it's tough.
That's the only reason I brought up that point of view is that followed your bringing up the wanting to be a high performer and like, this is the only thing that matters kind of thing, where you're going to sacrifice so much for this, right? I don't think if you're a hobbyist and you have a day job and you love making music and you also have a family and your significant other, your partner brings in a lion's share of the income, and this is a different thing, then I'm not talking to that human. I guess I'm talking about the person that wants to sacrifice all. I'm talking to you at 24. It's like, well, when you get to 34 and you don't have your One Direction success, and nothing has shifted, where is your brain at 34 versus 24 before you had that? And dependent on that, these markers, these achievements that along the way you're celebrating, they confirm positive growth and upward trajectory. And what that does to the mind, will affect the next step.
Let me interject something, because you made a point that okay, so I was probably, I'm just kind of like say it all out loud. I think it was 2012 was when the Andy Grammer song "Fine by Me" came out, which I co-wrote with him, produced, mixed. I played everything on it. It became a hot AC, like top 10. It did decently well. It was a platinum record here. That was like my first hit. And then within 6 months or so, I did a One Direction song that became a hit. So I was around 2012, 2013. But the decade before that, even though I had not done anything that had made me a ton of money, I had recorded local bands in high school that got record deals, and I worked for a big producer, Eric Valentine, who wasn't necessarily an overly complimentary guy. He was like not a guy who blows smoke up anyone's ass, the kindest guy in the world, but said, you make really good sounding things. Essentially, he gave me a lot of validation. So I saw someone whose records I admired who said, you know what you're doing. That gives me a certain amount of confidence. I worked on some things that were getting attention. None of them bands that got signed, they never went anywhere. So I had validation along the way that said, you can do this. From people outside myself, or outside people that that really knew what they were doing. At least I got feedback saying you could do this. And that, I think without that, I might not have continued to make records. So it was, even though I didn't reach the place financially or success wise, there were people who I trusted, who I knew would be hard on me, or were not going to just give me compliments to give me compliments. And by the way, you need those people in your life. The other side, which are people who just tell you everything you do is great. You want to be able to play your songs for people and they just go, I love it, because that's a really important thing. But you also need people to go, this is the best thing you've done, and here's why it's better than these things. And people who really know what they're doing. And so even though I had not had the career success by a lot of measures, no chart success, no big credits as a producer or mixer or writer or any of that, I was getting feedback that said, it's just a matter of if you want this enough and continue on. And, I had a band that, this band Streets Nowhere, my friend Dave Smallin, who I went to high school with, we made an album in my late teens that I think, he got offers from Capitol Records and Columbia Records and Roadrunner Records around when I was like 21-ish. And that it ended up getting signed, but the band fell apart because the label fell apart because major labels and whatever. But I could have had big success then. And that record came out the way I made it, and I mixed it and I produced it and I helped finish a couple of songs as a writer. And so it was still 9 years from then to when I had my first real success. But the fact that there were things kind of poking their head out was a really important thing. And I think without that, I don't know that at 25, when I had no money, I would have been like, no, I can do this. And I love this. Because I'd already spent time in real studios. So even though I had not made it yet, that kind of feedback is really important. I know you mentioned something about that. It made me think about that. I really did have the confidence, the non-delusional confidence that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, you have to have some sort of reward system going on, some sort of recognizing that you're moving. It could be slowly, but slowly upwards, forwards. It could be monetary. It could be, more records out than the previous year. It could be more people connecting and complimenting your work. It could be more people engaging and telling you it's not very good, but you're onto something. It doesn't have to be only positive feedback, just some sort of constructive feedback. And if you're, as I get older and I, listen to elders speak more and read more, connection seems to be one of the most valuable and important things in our lives. And if the reason I brought it up was that if you find yourself isolated because people don't understand you, quote unquote, is that whether it's musically or, psychologically, relationally, you're losing people that were close to you because of something, then it might be worth investigating what that is all I'm saying. And your value to connect with other people could be used elsewhere. And if we're not, I'm glad that last part came up, because if you're not recognizing these successes and other people aren't, then it's time to maybe take stock, and it's up to you to determine when that is. Also, a quick side note, my chat has been gone for the last 15 minutes. So sorry if I'm not engaging with people in the chat and seeing your questions. I hope that's okay.
It's fine. If there's anything, I'll pop it out to you. Yeah, and it also gets back to the other thing we talk about a lot, which is you really have to find your people in your creative community, because that's, again, like we talk about when all of us, you and me included, and all the people watching this and listening to these, when you look at other people's career, when you compare yourself to other people, you're comparing your practice routine to their highlight reel. Like all you're seeing is highlight reel. And the way that if you base your success based on trying to hit those marks, it's going to be a losing game. I mean, we've talked about this before. We know many successful writer, producer people that have had lots of number ones, and all they think about is how they don't currently have a number one and how are they going to get the next number one. And those people sound really miserable to me. You are going to survive in this thing and have success and sustain by making records that you love with people that you love. And if you are in a place in a literal place or emotional place where you are not connected to people, I think the number one goal has to be get connected to people and make things with people you like. It's the only way this thing has worked for me. And all the times when it's not that, I fucking hate it. I like music a ton, but making it with people that I don't like or working on things I don't like is never ever worth it. That's how you will have success, and that's how you get the feedback.
It's never worth it.
It's never worth it. That's how you get the feedback that will make you better. That's how you'll get excited about getting better. It's really the only way to exist.
Any other questions that we should hit?
Let's see. I'm gonna look at my thing again. Let's see. God, I can't even fucking read my writing. Oh, I like this. It wasn't even a question, but I think it's a good thing, and we like talking about this. Super Tight, which is a great name, asks, opinion: the best producers have a great ear for the right texture instead of over EQing. As another thing, I was with
cool.
Stuart again. I gotta have, but it's great. But it's a really important thing. I was at Stuart's place a couple of weeks ago, and we were listening to some of our favorite mixes, listening to this 90s into 2000s era rock stuff, listen to Rich Costey mixes and some of these amazing sounding rock bands, and then listening to some Timbaland, Missy Elliott records. And he was talking about some of the people that mixed those, because he was more in that world and knowing those engineers. And he was like, yeah, the guys that were mixing the Timbaland records were like, yeah, Timbaland just picks the best sounds. It already sounds great. He just has a sense of what sample is going to be in the right place and how it's going to be pitched. I mean, there's the interviews with 40, Drake's guy, and how he pitches things down, and that acts like a low pass filter, and what that does to tracks. I think it is a hugely valuable thing and hugely important thing. And I'm sure you see this with the wide variety of producers you work with. Sound selection. These guys aren't doing crazy EQ moves to make things work. They're picking the right kick drums and the right snares, and the sample feels a certain way and the guitars are a certain way. Do you see particular threads in that with the people that are better than others in terms of producers?
Yeah, I mean, that's all arrangement conversations, right? That's how you vertically arrange a record, sonically speaking, versus the time version of the arrangement, which is where pieces come in and out, right? So I like to think about arrangement, course of time, and I guess that's horizontally and temporally, and then vertically speaking from bottom to top end of things. And you can dynamically shift records. You can put a high-end Juno buzzy synth in a chorus with no EQ on it, and you feel more high-end in the chorus. Or you can stack an octave higher vocal. You can do all these production tricks that require no EQ, just the right placement of, the harmonics. And that's always what separates the best from the good, or the best from the not so good.
Hex asked, who, maybe we could just shout out some great people. Who are some of your favorite producers who do this particularly well?
Yeah, sorry guys, I can't
no, it's good. That's all right.
Oh man.
I know you love OG Volta. I don't know.
I mean, yeah. I mean, OG Volta comes to mind, but also like D Mile.
Jeez.
The Bruno Mars crew. Silk Sonic is kind of a great example of this. Like when the sparkle comes and goes, right? And it's not any EQing. I'm sure Serban played a role in it, but that's in the bells and whistles of the arrangement.
And those Lucky Day records that D-Mile did are so spectacular, and everything is like that's the thing that I find really difficult is I always am over EQing things when I get to mix, and it's something we talked about last week. I need to just separate my mix process from my production process more, and you gave me some good ideas about that. But that's one thing that I find really magical about what D-Mile does is there's a lot of sounds that feel present but don't feel bright. Yes. And that is a really like classic, that's real instrumentation, darker sounds, but somehow because the guitar part is here and the bass is here and the vocals here and the sparkle is here, they don't all have to be bright to be really present. And that's a really like sound selection separating is powerful.
I would refer to that as a more musical producer. And that's not saying that this producer can shred on the guitar or on the keys and they're a shredder. They just have a musical sensibility to the way that they move through time in a song. And I would consider myself a musical mixer, but I cannot shred on any instrument well at all. But I think about the arrangement musically, like what is now here to grab our attention, what is now elevating here, what needs to be pulled out. I don't think about things with EQ. I think about things in vertical, sonic harmonics. And I don't think EQ is just a tool, right? We've talked about this on previous episodes. All these tools have a purpose, but really what we're trying to do is do the thing that we're just talking about now, which is have the right sound come and go at the right time that creates some sort of compelling emotional feeling, and takes us on a journey through a record, right? And that could be EQ, and you can hear potential in a sound. Like say you're sampling a record and the record has no low end. It's like, well, maybe a low end boost on the sample extreme will bring up something that's there. Cool, that could be a move. But also maybe using that only for this mid-range thing and playing a bass under it makes it artistically more interesting and less copycatty of what the sample is. Now you're harmonically working around it in the lower end because the sample is telling you a story, right? That's, there are a lot of ways in. So I laughed at the statement because, yeah, that's a fact. But also the best producers also know when to do a broad stroke EQ that brings out what was missing from the sound that they heard potential in, right? Like it could go both ways. It's just that statement makes me laugh because yes, it's true, but also the other part is true too, which is you can use EQ to bring out a sound. I think the idea is by the end of it, is the sound demolished? Like, does it still have its integrity to it from the initial spark? That's why, like, I would comment on if you're an engineer or a producer engineer or songwriter dabbling in EQ, if you have molested the sound till it no longer sounds like the thing that excited the room, then that's too far. And that's the only way that it's too far.
And by the way, that's as a mixer, when you're sound designing, maybe you screwing it up gets it to the right place.
Exactly.
But it just depends where you are in the process. I definitely, and maybe just true for me, but I imagine I'm not special in this realm, that I often am trying to get too much out of a sound. Like there's a sound that's there in a mix, in a production, even if it's a production that I've done, where I'm like, oh, I really wish this, and I try to brighten it up and I try to get more saturation in the low end, and it's just not as good, and then it starts getting in the way of other stuff, but I want to hear it more present, so I'm trying to do more to it on its own, and it's just not meant to fit into the mix like that. It's got a narrow space, and I need to just leave it. I find myself doing that a lot, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So a couple of people asked in the chat about the Verite stuff. Is that how you say it? Verite?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk about mixing that stuff at all? I'm not familiar with it, but I don't know. A number of people saying how great the separation is. Do you know about who produced it? What makes it what makes it so great in addition to what you do?
I mean, the productions, it depends on what song, and I'm forgetting who produced what songs. I don't want to speak.
Different producers.
Different producers. But the separation is there. Kelsey looks for me to increase that for sure. I think we both love black space. We love space between sounds, parts, long tails, things that, so if the dryness is going to be dry, like let it be stark difference dynamically from section to section where it's fucking dry, then it's super wet in the chorus, for example, on some of the records. But space is definitely like, that's the key. I think that's why I love working on her music, because I really like black space in records.
When you say black space, what do you mean? Like
the
space in the frequency range, things not happening, and in time wise. Yeah, exactly. Both. It's like if you look at a black canvas and there's like in a gallery and there's like one element, there's a lot of black space around it, and like the thing is happening and it's drawing your attention. Like that can happen musically speaking as well. Like Jesus and 808 and Heartbreaks has a lot of black space. It's like 4 elements or 3 elements happening, and you can pick and choose what you focus on because there's so much. Nothing's overly dense and assaulting you sonically where you're like distracted. It's not a kaleidoscope. It's you know what I mean? It's like you can have a crazy kaleidoscope of colors and dense, loud, bright pop records where there's 18 synths jamming at you from all angles, and that creates and elicits a certain other feeling. I'm talking about the opposite of that, which is deliberately not trying to take up all the time and frequency space and all of that, letting things breathe, letting reverb tails go out. Yeah.
Which allows you to lean in, hear the lyric, discover more, be surprised more, a little bit more mystery, and that those records are filled with mystery. So
nice.
I'm glad that's a notable record or sonic choice recognition, because I tend to like records like that.
Let me see if I can. See if I can grab 1 or 2 more things. God, my handwriting is terrible. I have to bring my computer next time.
It happens.
That's kind of a fun one. It might lead to the previous conversation we had too. What creative thing would you do if it wasn't music?
Oh, God. Jeez, that's so hard. I think my friends and people around me would say cook, but I don't want to cook for a living. I probably said this on the podcast, but I only want to cook for no currency exchange for friends and family.
But then write a cookbook and become a multimillionaire from it.
I would love to write. I mean, I've already started a cookbook. I don't know if I'll actually do it.
I know we've alluded to it on the streams before.
I guess that's what I would choose. I really like photography. I'm just not that good at it, and I like viewing it more than being able to capture it, because the idea of seeing everything through a lens at all times seems exhausting instead of just like experiencing with our own lenses that we have. But I really respect the capturing process of photography. I think I like that more than the idea of painting. If I think outside into other art forms, I think I'm more drawn to great, compelling photography than I am, canvas painting and modern art in that way. Wow, good question. I don't know.
I have kind of a funny answer for it, which is I think it's just, music I think is the most universal thing. That there's very few people that just don't like music. It's a pretty straightforward human universal. We do things together, we synchronize, we sing and we clap and we dance. By the way, that was me pantomiming clapping, just in case people didn't know what I was talking about when I said clap. I just saw myself on the screen do this when I said clap, like an idiot. But I think I was just surrounded by so many great music people early on, and that was the outlet that I had when I was a teenager. I probably, not that I'd be great at all of it, but I think I could have done pretty much anything. If I was surrounded by painters, I would have done that. If I was surrounded by writers, I would have done that. If I was surrounded by, it's all kind of the same to me, which is why most of my close friends who are not music related are clothing designers or artists, visual artists or writers or things like that, because it all feels kind of the same to me. I like all these other art forms kind of equally. I just happen to do lots and lots and lots of music.
Yeah, I would actually, I would do poetry.
I like that for you.
I mean, I dabble. I'm not very good, but I dabble, and I like that.
I did not know. This is new news. I would like to read Jon's poetry. Send Jon some DMs if you'd like to read his poetry.
Hell no, nobody gets. No, that's not going to happen.
We have like one or two other things, but they'd be really involved ones. So maybe we just save them for next week.
Okay.
I do. This actually might be a quickish one. Green Mountain Studio asks, "What do you do when stems don't match the production?" I just want to shout out. Not a specific person.
Don't start it.
Yeah. Well, I just got hired for a mix actually, and they sent me the stems, and they're perfect. And I was like, and I talked to the producer.
And
I was like,
feeling.
Just make sure it's all. I just want to bring, because they were saying like they had it was a rough mix, and then they had somebody else mix and it wasn't good, and they're calling me last minute. Can you fix this? Or we're not sure. And I was like, as long as what you send to me comes up exact, because I don't have a mix assistant. As long as it comes up to me, I open a Pro Tools session, pull in the files, and it sounds like the thing that you love, and then I can work from there. She's like, absolutely, send it to me. I brought it up. Sounds exactly the same. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, I only want to work like that. That's the only way.
You with rare exception, you just won't. You'll just be like, no, you got to send me the. You got to make it sound like you love it, and then I will make it
very
better.
Few exceptions. Like this very strong relationship with a producer that knows that I'm going to do a certain thing to it, that they're confident leaving it where there's a lot more room. I don't. But if the arrangement isn't the same as the last printed, rough that everybody's been listening to, and it's just missing synths and missing drums, then I'm not. No, don't touch it. Do yourself a favor. There's a crazy headache about to come for you. If you send back a mix, you could lose the gig because you sent back the wrong arrangement. Yeah. I mean, I've done that with massive artists because, I can't really talk about it. It's just like sent back a mix with the wrong arrangement. They won't even listen to the mix because the drums are already starting from the top. And that's just how it was sent to me. It's just like, oh, that's not the rough you've been listening to? The one that's in my session? That sucks. Because that's not on me. And that sucks. So I'm very sure.
Yeah, and it's worth acknowledging, again, we don't need to get into the full conversation. We've talked about it before, and people have it plenty. But mixing 20 years ago is different than mixing now for a large percentage of records for most pop, hip hop, R&B, that sort of thing, where the mix engineer is not getting raw, untreated, underside snare mics and things like that, to where you're then going to build it. What it now is, because everybody's working in the box, you get rough mixes that sound pretty close, sometimes 80, 90% there, and the mix engineers will take it from there to 100. And that's also how people like Jon can mix multiple songs in a day, that sort of thing. The role has evolved into something slightly different. Whereas someone like, Kian, who we've had on and we'll have on again, when he's also engineering stuff and getting raw drum files, he's really building something in a different way. So there's certainly exceptions to that. But if you're mixing a record and people are loving a rough mix, and then you get files that just don't sound anything like the rough mix, it's like, what are we doing? It's not what we're here to do. All right. Well, that's it.
Till next
time.
Nice
little hour.
Yeah.
And let's just put in one little thing at the end, which is you and I have discussed doing some sort of a live event or a small group of people and stream it with multiple Live with Matt Rad guests. We've talked to Baines and TZO. We've talked to a few other people about doing something. So it's in the works. I know people are asking about that. So we haven't solidified it yet, but we've talked about some dates. We're going to, obviously there's the,
can't wait.
The global crisis that we don't want to talk about too much is obviously going to affect things. So we're going to make sure that'll be okay. But we've talked about that a bit, and I'm sure we will update more as we have more coming soon. Love you, Jon.
Love you too.
Bye, guys.
Peace.